Hello everyone, and welcome to the 5th episode of Analyzing Benevolence, featuring the main character and final girl of the second and third Terrifier movies, Sienna Shaw. Now, firstly, where the hell have I been? Well, there are two answers to that, actually. I've been super busy with school and work, and both have been taking up my time and energy. And of course, while I love working on these videos, I've just been needing to prioritize those things at the moment, as well as just my life, over what is more or less just a passion project. I also have been working very heavily on a specific video, and Boonshoy from Amphibia, and while the script for that is done, I still decided to take a break from working on it for now because A, it's going to be insanely long, like, for reference, here's the Slay the Princess script word count, and here's the word count for the Boonshoy script, and B, I simply just wanted to prioritize Halloween videos at the moment, which brings us to today's topic, Sienna Shaw. While she's by no means the most iconic final girl, I would say that she has become more and more of a phenomenon as time goes on, not to mention that I think she is just an insanely unique character in this medium, and is an incredibly interesting mixture of ideas that make her stand apart from the more iconic final girls, such as Laurie Strode or Nancy Thompson. However, those are also characters I will cover in the future as well. Not to mention that, truthfully, I just wanted to get into the Terrifier series more, and this video was a pretty perfect excuse to do so. And despite all the gore and violence that is present within these movies, I do also think that there's some pretty decent nuance and depth within them, some of which I'll be talking about in this video. But with that out of the way, let's begin. While with my other videos I've made a sort of 5 to 6 section format in order to separate my points, I feel as though with Sienna the points that I have to make on her sort of blend together. So because of that, while there are going to be sort of sections in this video, they aren't going to be as cutthroat as they have been in other videos. Born to a comic artist and insurance customer service representative, I don't know if that's the exact term that her mother is in this movie, so let me know if I made a mistake here or not, Sienna would have a pretty welcoming and loving upbringing for a time, along with her younger brother Jonathan. This would soon change, however, as apparently her father started having more severe signs of mental illness and started acting a lot more erratic and even abusive, especially towards Sienna. This would eventually lead to her father getting drunk one night, driving into a transformer, and then burning to death. This event would lead to a sudden change in the demeanor of the family, their mother being more aggressive and defensive about things, Jonathan becoming more interested in the disturbing and violent nature of stuff, as well as investigating what his father has written down, and Sienna being much more prone to suppressing her emotions and feelings about things most of the time, and possibly developing a psychosis similar to her father's. A lot of her father's mental illness is left pretty ambiguous, at least so far. But what is stated is that he had some form of a tumor in his brain, and likely saw visions and mixtures of things that aren't real. However, a lot of this also seemingly ties into his biblical revelations that he seemed to have, which we'll get more into later. What is important about these biblical revelations is that it kind of causes a sort of chicken or the egg scenario, where it's hard to tell if these revelations came from her father being ill and thus having more susceptibility to seeing what is going to occur, or if it's something akin to him being gifted these revelations early on, which then caused the tumor to start spreading in his brain. The reason I think this is important is because of how Sienna developed symptoms of mental illness, particularly anxiety and some form of psychosis, before she even met Art the Clown. We don't know exactly when these symptoms started to manifest, however we can say that it was at least some time after her father's death, and at some point had to be put into a mental hospital due to her instability. As shown in the scene where she seemingly hallucinates the news reporter referencing how Victoria was institutionalized for psychoanalysis, with the reporter just out of nowhere saying, "Like you, Sienna," before she goes back to just sharing the news. At the very least, it is shown that she takes alprazolam, a medication meant to deal with anxiety disorders or depression, which she specifically downs after that moment. So it is very well possible that Sienna's psychosis is very heavily stress-based rather than any particular genetic form of a psychotic disorder. However, it is unclear, and it could be a mixture of the two. But let me know what you think in the comments, how you feel about this, because I might be wrong on this front. Regardless on what her exact symptoms and causes are, this has led to her doubting her mindset and her belief on what exactly is even real or false. This can also be attributed to how she is a naturally born artist, and has an affinity towards the more fantastical and alternative, possibly feeling somewhat isolated due to these features. Not to mention that the fact that the man she looked up to was deemed as an insane maniac by the people around her, including to some degree her own mother. And even when not considering that, we don't know what kind of abuse he inflicted on her, so it can only be assumed how it affected her psyche and how she sees the world. This can also be seen pretty well with her friends, who, while good-natured, do seem to naturally have a tendency to dismiss Sienna's worries. In one scene, this straight up goes as far as one of Sienna's friends, Brooke, actually slipping Molly into her drink in order to calm her down at the Halloween party. I also think that her natural skepticism and her own distrust in it can be seen in the contradiction of her own words. Oftentimes, she'll say statements in one scene, arguing against someone, or making some kind of point that something is wrong, but in the next just fall back on her own claims, or just denying that anything bad happened in the first place. Which I think is both because of her own distrust towards her judgment, but also out of fear of judgment from others. Despite her reluctance to use this tool of hers, this exact skepticism is what I'd argue keeps her alive in these movies. Best example of this is the dream that she had involving Art the Clown in the Clown Cafe. This is actually the first encounter she had of Art the Clown, where everyone around her is just having fun and excited to see Art, only for her to just be uncomfortable. Which of course leads to everyone in the dream dying except for her. Partially because she was able to predict that something would be in the cereal box that was shown and use it as a weapon to defend herself, which of course saves her in the real world, as well as kept her from being burned to death by Art's strange attack. By the way, I do gotta say, it's kind of weird that Art can just attack people in dreams, and this is barely elaborated on, but like, I don't know, it's not something I'm insanely upset about, and besides, I think a rule of thumb with Art the Clown is just that the fucker can do basically everything, so yeah. But that's besides the point. What is important to note, though, is why she ended up surviving this dream. The sword she had that was gifted from her father. See, I didn't mention it before, but while the exact nature of how these biblical revelations came to be is unclear, what is confirmed is that at some point it was revealed to Mike Shaw, Sienna's father, that Sienna would be some form of a chosen one, someone who would be able to defeat Art the Clown and possibly whatever demonic presence is aiding him. This is found through the journal entries that Mike had, as well as outside confirmation by the pale girl in Victoria's body, telling her that she can see why they chose her. But to be more specific, at some point, Mike got his hands on a sword, of which is of unknown origin. However, in a vision, it is shown that a ceramic-like figure, who I think is of the Virgin Mary, but she could just be some kind of angel, I'm honestly not sure, someone who's more educated in this, please correct me, is whipping a demon into forging a sword. I think we can make a fair inference from this scene that the sword was created for the sole purpose of being used against demons, and that the angels in heaven above were able to imprison one of them into making the weapon, thereby being able to use fire against fire. Because of this, the sword has many abilities. The one that's worth noting the most is that it gives the wielder an accelerated healing ability. This even seemed to be passed on to Sienna permanently at the end of Terrifier 3, as even when she ended up losing her sword, the wounds on her hand quickly healed. Beside the sword, though, Mike decided to craft his own part of Sienna's destiny as well, her costume. Created for Sienna when she was a young girl at the request that he drew a super strong heroine. It's revealed to Sienna later on that the character was actually made as a representation of her and who she would grow up to be later on. Which, I'm not gonna lie, is incredibly funny in an insanely fucked up way considering how skimpy her outfit is.
I got another question before I go. When Zenket's powers up, how come he turns into a sleazy, garter-belted bikini?
I guess your dad was into kinky stuff like that.
You're kidding.
But putting away that incredibly convoluted ethical rabbit hole aside for the sake of my own sanity, she does take legitimate pride in this appearance. And even if she doesn't realize that this character was created specifically to represent her, she still spent months creating this costume for it as a way to represent her dad. And when she takes on the persona of this angel warrior within fights with Art the Clown, she gains a much more tenacious and almost brutal personality. Not just in the way that she fights back, but in the way that she's able to receive attacks and get right back up, such as when she rushes over to Jonathan to shield him from being whipped. In these scenes, a blind fury is shown to be within Sienna, something that she almost seems to hide deeply in herself as much as her fear and anxieties. Besides these obvious moments of fighting, it can also be shown when she lashes out at the true crime podcast host, asking about how she copes after being attacked by Art the Clown initially, and losing her mom and friends, letting out all the pent-up frustrations that she had that she just wasn't able to express throughout the past week. Which, by the way, brings me to the point that even though her first encounter with Art the Clown gave her more of an outlook to sort of be herself and express her tenacity, It also made her problems of suppression significantly worse. While she does seem to have a better time addressing the problems to herself and at least writing them in a journal, she is much more willing to try and hide any of her issues from other people. The best example I can think of this is when she has a hallucination at the table with her aunt's family, where she sees Brooke on the other side asking her to pass the rice, berating her about how she was the reason that she died, and that she's even the reason that her mom died as well, obviously being a manifestation of her own survivor's guilt. But the way she deals with this is just by saying everything is okay to her relatives and just leaving the table and going upstairs. But despite these mental issues, I still think that Sienna would have been able to continue to have a normal life with her brother, cousin, and aunt and nephew if it weren't for one simple thing: the fact that Art was still alive. Because truthfully, there's a strange contradictory irony and tragedy in Sienna's character, and it's that despite being one of the most strong and powerful final girls both mentally and physically, she still is also one of the most tortured and traumatized. She was abused by her father with a brain tumor who would later kill himself on a night of drinking, lost her mother and best friends due to a deranged psychopath, given scars all across her body, be put into a psychiatric hospital after the experience for 5 years, have her most traumatizing moment be glamorized and talked about by the true crime crowd, and the moment when she was finally able to give a chance to try and restart, something entirely out of her control that ruined her life, comes back to haunt her, and murders her aunt, uncle, even her brother that she so desperately tried to protect all those years ago. But despite all that, when the demon tries to possess her and make her give in to its will, she still resists, because there's still one person she cares deeply for who she'll do anything to protect: Gabby, her younger cousin. And so she resists till the very end. And even when she is finally able to murder that bastard who horrifically slaughtered almost everyone she cares about, she still rushes to save Gabby from the portal to hell that opened from the blood of the demon. She encourages her, saying that she can do it and that she believes in her, and even goes as far as to use her sword to try and pull her up, having Gabby grab onto the handle as she herself grips onto the sharp side of the sword in a desperate attempt to pull her up, only for her to fall anyway, and for Sienna to scream in agony and realizing that Art escaped, before falling to the floor and declaring that, despite it all, she will find her and save her. Which leads us to the current status of Sienna as a character, as we don't know exactly how she'll develop in Terrifier 4. But what we can assume is that she will do literally anything she can to try and save Gabby, even if it means traveling entire worlds to do so, just for what may seem to be a possibly lost cause, and maybe even finally defeat the evil that has been plaguing Miles County for the last 6 years, and possibly even the evil that has been plaguing the world for the past thousands of years. So, who is Sienna Shaw? She is a girl who has had her fair share of damaging experiences, many of which include the death of the one she cares about, her own survivor's guilt of not being able to save them, and even her own anxieties and fears that plagued her on a day-to-day basis, even before some of the most traumatizing events in her life occurred. But despite all that, she is an artist, a warrior, and someone who's chosen from the heavens to save the world from evil, because of her endless tenacity and resilience to never give up. And no matter what happens, no matter what form of pain she goes through, she will be there to save the people she cares about, because of her benevolence. Thank you to everyone who's still watching the video. Again, I want to apologize that it's been forever since I've actually uploaded. And of course, thank you to our patrons again. Again, this time it's just only Carlos and Saint Valentine. But still, it's greatly appreciated, thank you. And I don't really have a shout out of the week this time, simply because I'm not sure who to shout out. I'll probably have something by next week, but I didn't really properly think of it for this video, so I apologize. But that aside, make sure to check out my Discord, my Patreon, and yeah. This is a shorter video, I do realize that, partially because I wanted to get something out, like just to keep people happy, but there will be longer videos this month, and there will be longer videos in the future, so stay tuned for that. But anyway, that's besides the point. I don't have too much to say now, other than just have a lovely day. Thank you. Hey guys, what if instead of Art the Clown, his name was actually Fart the Clown and he farted on people? That'd be really crazy, wouldn't it?